Greetings. It's time for our monthly update on inflation, both at the US level and at the worldwide level. And of course, the worldwide level is the only one to really look at because that is the one that is tied to the borderless nature of quantitative easing, technological deflation, and commodity prices. But we start like we did in prior months at the Bureau of Labor Statistics website, bls.gov, to look at the US CPI. So we go here, Consumer Price Index, click on this icon. And we will format it by choosing the original value, 2 months and 12 months. So you see the absolute value of the CPI, and yes, it's rising, but 2% a year inflation is normal. I actually think it should be 3% a year because inflation is the fuel of technological progress. When there's 3% a year inflation, that in fact comprises the fuel that technology consumes to produce more technology and more deflation that enables more quantitative easing to be done without aberrant inflation. Now we go over here to see what the 10-year rolling average of inflation was. So you take the most recent month, August of 2021, 273, and exactly 10 years prior, 227, rounded up. So then what we do is we take this calculator and we take those two numbers, 273 divided by 227, and you get 1.20, meaning that there was 20% inflation over the entire 10-year period from September 2011 to August of 2027. So how much is that in an annualized sense? So you take this factorial and take the 10th root of that, since that's a 10-year inflation number. The 1/10 root of that gives you the annual number. So x to the y power times 0.1 equals 1.0186. And then you minus 1 from that and times 100. You get 1.86% annual inflation for the last 10 years. That has been the inflation rate. It is significantly below 2% a year and certainly not even at 3% a year. And this is the US Consumer Price Index, the full index, in fact, so it does include food and energy prices. Those are not excluded, contrary to what some people may claim. 1.86% has been the CPI inflation rate. So why are you hearing so much screaming in the media, which seems to have died down just a little bit, hasn't it? So we go down to the 2-month and 12-month averages. The 2-month percentage change, it had that brief spike, and I covered that phenomenon as it was going on over the last couple of months quite substantially. And it's already moderating down. The 2-month inflation rate is already returning to the norm. That whole period of hype is now mostly in the past. Furthermore, at the 12-month level, yes, this is still high on an annualized basis, but it's petering out, it's flattening, and it's about to fall very soon, because to stay this high means there has to be more than 5% over the next 12 months as well. And this is just a spring back from the near zero we had in early 2020, from the halt in economic activity from the early stages of the COVID-19 crisis. And this is just evening that out, just like we have seen in the original number up top over here. The steeper part of the curve over here is just offsetting the flat and declining part of the curve over here. The average, as we saw, is still 1.86%. So there is no aberrant hyperinflation in the US CPI, and people keep disputing that. They will either say that there is hyperinflation and the CPI does not calculate it correctly, or they will debate by anecdote, saying, well, I heard somewhere that lumber prices rose or something like that. Out of 1,000 possible products, they would choose the one that was in the news that had a high amount of price growth within a certain period, but not the other ones that didn't, and certainly not the ones that had the lowest amount of price growth or in fact price decline over the same period. One can permanently create a narrative of high inflation just by choosing different products based on whichever one rose the most in the prior month and keep changing that around. A holistic index of all items is the only way to look at it, and that is why the US CPI is itself not even the best possible metric. For that, we go to the Worldwide Commodity Index, which viewers of this channel know is what I consider to be the ultimate metric of inflation, because that includes actual commodities and it is worldwide. So all arguments about what the US central bank might be doing or that the US CPI metric is not calculated correctly go out the window, because this is an unriggable metric of worldwide commodity prices that are all traded by multiple countries and just cannot be rigged. So we go to that. The Goldman Sachs Commodity Index is currently 545. And over the last 1 year, it seems like it rose 58%. Now that would comprise hyperinflation. 58% rise in commodity prices in a single year. That seems very high, but then the devil is in the details. What if this starting point is not the right one? You must take a longer period, 10 years, just like we took in the CPI calculation. We took the 10-year rolling average of that. And since the age of quantitative easing, massive money printing, was over the last 11 years, that is the appropriate window of time to take, because so many people with a traditional economics background, which is to say an outdated economics background, still think that printing money causes hyperinflation, and since it's not occurring, they are utterly befuddled about why that may be. I explained very well why there is no high inflation because of technological deflation offsetting that money printing, but they just can't accept that because that's an idea that came out of the PhD economist ivory tower, which is hyper theoretical, as we often point out. When evidence contradicts their theories, they just disregard the evidence because their theoretical views are the only thing that counts. And so with this commodity price over a 10-year basis, we see that it has actually declined. Minus 1.87% was the annual rate of change. That is substantial deflation. So while the US CPI was growing at 1.86% a year, the commodity index worldwide has been shrinking by exactly that same amount, minus 1.87%. Now that's a coincidence, but commodity prices are actually indicating deflation. Therefore, the increase in service prices, etc., comprise what made it go from a negative rate of growth of commodity prices to a mild positive of plus 1.86% a year in the CPI, at least in the United States. But on commodity prices alone, it's minus 1.87%. That's why not only is there not inflation, but if you think gold is the way to offset inflation, that is one of the worst possible investment theses you could possibly think of. I'm shocked at how many people say, A, there's going to be hyperinflation because there's been money printing for 11 years, which has still not caused hyperinflation, but somehow now it's about to. It hasn't happened in 11 years, but it's about to happen now. And therefore, because there's going to be hyperinflation, buy gold, even though technology increases the supply of gold at a rate greater than the demand for gold rises. And that's why we saw oil prices decline, and that is why we are seeing gold prices not rise at all. And I've done a lot of videos about why these gold bug type people, the people who pile into gold assuming that it's going to go up, they never ever discuss the terrible returns of gold and how they've been losing money because of their fundamentally flawed thesis that they just can't let go of. So you can see that in this video over here. Now, over the last couple of weeks, things have been spiking up a little bit. Oil and natural gas have risen a fair bit in price because the stimulus program from the Biden administration, the U.S., is doing a lot to clamp down on the U.S. fracking industry in order to make energy prices more expensive and perhaps facilitate a transition to electric vehicles and renewable energy. This should never be done by government intervention at all. These transitions should only occur through natural technological displacement and technological disruption. Because by making oil and natural gas more expensive, it will cause greater dislocations. But even so, on the topic of inflation, which is what we're speaking about in this video, if that legislation forces oil prices to be more expensive, that will merely speed up the adoption of alternatives and the demand destruction of oil, and oil will fall in price further over the medium term after the initial spike as well, just like we have seen in any other commodity where the price was made high by artificial intervention. There you have it, another month of inflation updates, and as you can see, the brief flurry of hype around possible hyperinflation is already dying down because that lasted for only a couple months, which is what I was saying all along during that period, if you recall. And now we're back to a mode of even the CPI metric through cherry-pick data points of the 12-month average and saying that this is the highest annual inflation rate in a long time just because it was starting from an unusually depressed point of deflation from a year prior. All that is just noise. The 10-year trend is completely not moving at all and not moving at all towards high inflation, and in fact proves that if not for the massive money printing that's going on, we would be in deflation, which would be particularly problematic for most people, as I explained in this video up here. But anyway, that was the update for the most recent month of inflation data, and I hope you found this informative. And if you like this type of content, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel. Thank you very much for watching.